Okay. All right, so good afternoon and welcome to the cote-saint-luc edition of the 2023 CBC Canada Reads. My name is Lisa. We're so happy to be back here in person once again. As you may be aware, our two previous editions were held online. But when our defenders are battling it out, nothing beats the in-person contest. CBC Canada Reads says the stories we tell and the way we tell them can shape how we see ourselves, our communities, and the world, and that this collection of books is an opportunity to broaden our horizons, expand our worldview, and think differently about the world around us and our place in it, with this year's theme being one book to shift our perspective. To begin, each defender will have 5 minutes to talk about their book. I'll be keeping track throughout the program, and we'll let the defenders know when their time is running out. There's going to be, oh yes, very serious, yes. After there'll be some additional questioning, and later we will give you the opportunity to answer questions while we tally your votes, and we'll announce the winner at the end of today's program. The order in which we will hear from our panelists has already been predetermined, and without further ado, our first defender is Danielle.
Everybody ready? The book I'm defending and feel most exemplifies this year's theme, one book to shift your perspective, is Ducks, 2 Years in the Oil Sands by Kate Beaton. Ducks is an autobiographical graphic novel that recounts author Kate Beaton's time spent working in the Alberta oil sands. Before there was Kate Beaton, New York Times bestselling cartoonist of Hark, a Vagrant, there was Katie Beaton of Cape Breton Beatons, specifically Mabou, a tight-knit seaside community where the lobster is as abundant as beaches, fiddles, and Gaelic folk songs. With the singular goal of paying off her student loans, Katie heads out west to take advantage of Alberta's oil rush, part of the long tradition of East Coasters who seek gainful employment elsewhere when they can't find it in the homeland they love so much. Katie encounters the harsh reality of life in the oil sands, where trauma is an everyday occurrence, yet is never discussed. Beaton's natural cartooning prowess is on full display as she draws colossal machinery and mammoth vehicles set against a sublime Albertan backdrop of wildlife, northern lights, and boreal forests. Her first full-length graphic narrative, Ducks, 2 Years in the Oil Sands, is an untold story of Canada, a country that prides itself on its egalitarian ethos and natural beauty while simultaneously exploiting both the riches of its land and the humanity of its people. Another reason to choose Ducks for the win this year, if you like to go with the best of lists. Here are just 10 of this title's impressive mentions. One of only 2 Canadian titles on Barack Obama's favorite books of 2022 list. New York Times Notable Book of 2022. New Yorker, Time, NPR, Chicago Tribune, Washington Post Best Book of 2022, Time Top 10 Nonfiction Books of 2022, Forbes Best Graphic Novels of 2022, Guardian Best Graphic Novels of 2022. If you need the reassurance of Giller Prize winning author, you can find it from Madeleine Tien, offering her praise by saying, Ducks is an unforgettable, riveting work. Kate Beaton opens the mind's eye, allowing us to inhabit landscapes and experiences crucial to our time, yet largely unseen. Artful, considered, and courageous, Ducks is a landmark work. If your vote is truly based on which book best adheres to the theme, one book to shift your perspective, rest assured Kate Beaton masters this feat in this highly acclaimed work. Beaton avoids caricaturing, the areas in which she works. She also goes to great lengths, not only to reflect on the industry that both helps and hinders her, but also pays tribute to the majestic beauty that surrounds her. Kate Beaton challenges us to think of people in situations with compassion, empathy, and by avoiding easy stereotypes. So right now I will read a very short passage from the book. You know what this is? Yes, we have them at St. Crude. Good, then I don't have to teach you preschool. You know where anything is yet? No. Okay, the main warehouse supplies, the tool crib, the gasifier, UNO, froth, and all the rest. There's sea cans overstocked, lock these, everyone's a thief. Lock everything, it's our asses on the line, and wear your PPE. Large equipment is across the yard with the mechanics. We're small equipment, so we handle items under 2 grand. Yeah, we knew that. Lunch halls across the yard and the trailer by the mechanic shop. Okay. Did you meet everyone yet? Oh no, why would you? Well, you meet him. Leon, is this a nice place to work? What kind of question is that? You're here, you make money, you don't fuck up, and you don't get fired. Then I have to train some other dumb fuck from butthole nowhere. Do me a favor, don't fuck up, don't get fired. In conclusion, graphic stories have been told since time immemorial. From 17,000-year-old cave paintings, hieroglyphs of ancient Egypt, tapestry panels of the Middle Ages, and the invention of the printing press, all have had a graphic story to tell. Today, manga, comics, comic books, graphic literature, graphic stories, graphic novels are analogous to the same form of text. However, an enduring prejudice towards these texts as substandard literature has been difficult to overcome. I urge you to shift your perspective by selecting ducks as the winner of today's debate, and with your vote, you'll stand by me in acknowledging once and for all that graphic novels do indeed constitute viable and respectable forms of literature, ones that both support inclusivity and accessibility by providing an alternative means to share profound and important stories that need to be told and showcasing them in a different light through a different lens. Shift your perspective with this book that challenges us to be human, compassionate, and empathetic. Be brave and select the trailblazer in the blot, ducks.
That is Mearaid.
Hello, everyone. My name is Mearaid, and I'm going to be defending this beautiful book, which is called Greenwood by Michael Christie. So before I start, I do want to show you one really neat feature of this book. Not only is it beautiful inside, it's actually beautiful outside. So I just want to put this down and I'll show you quickly.
You can see it, but when she fans the edge of the pages.
So my book is about trees and family relationships, but on the edges of the pages, you can see the printing of the crosscut of a tree. Let's start by talking about the author. Michael Christie is a novelist who grew up in Thunder Bay in Northern Ontario and currently lives on Galiano Island, BC, in a small house he designed and built by hand. His 2015 novel, If I Fall, If I Die, won the Northern Lit Award and was longlisted for the Giller. When Greenwood was first published in 2019, it also made the Giller longlist and won the 2020 Arthur Ellis Award for Best Novel. This is the second time that his novel was not put on the longlist and made it to the shortlist. Greenwood is a sprawling, multi-generational family saga that spans a period of over 130 years, from the Great Depression to a bleak prediction of the very near future, and centers on one Canadian family's relationship with trees. It uses forests and trees as ongoing metaphors for individuals, families, and society at large. Its overt subject matter includes the exploitation of trees as resources, their physiology and significance to the ecosystem, as well as their use in art and craft. At the front of the book, there is an illustration of a cross-section of a tree. This is the table of contents. Its outermost ring is labeled 2038, and with several other important years identified at its center, the heartwood, labeled 1908. This is how the novel is laid out. After meeting Jacinda, Jake Greenwood, in 2038, we move backwards in time to 2008, then we jump to 1974, 1934, and then finally to 1908, and the start of the Greenwood line. With every jump, there are twists and turns before the story starts expanding again, back to 1934, 1974, 2008, and finally to 2038. In 2038, Jay Greenwood, a dendrologist, which is the botanical study of trees and other woody plants, is paying off her mounting student debt by working as a guide in the Greenwood Arboreal Cathedral. The world has undergone a great withering, an ecological catastrophe during which rising temperatures unleashed a virulent new strain of fungus that destroyed the planet's trees and leaves Greenwood Island as one of the last refuges of old growth trees. The lack of forest canopy caused soils to dry up, creating killer dust clouds as fine as all-purpose flour. And most of the world's inhabitants have succumbed to rib retch, a lethal hacking cough that snaps ribs like kindling. When a former boyfriend appears on the island with an old diary and some information about Jake's unknown family tree, a mystery is presented that will eventually take us back in time to 1908 and clear across to Canada's east coast. In 2008, after an unsettled childhood living with his free-spirited hippie mother in her Westphalia van and struggling with drug addiction, Jake's father, Liam Greenwood, a carpenter who now works with Reclaim Wood, reflects on his life while dying after falling off a scaffold 27 feet high to the cold concrete floor in an empty mansion he's working on. In 1974, Willow Greenwood is a radical environmentalist who harvests mushrooms to make money and sabotages logging equipment. She's recently out of jail after being imprisoned for one of her many environmental protests. Willow pours sugar into gas tanks of logging equipment to atone for the millions of acres of trees her father's company has chopped down. In 1934, Everett Greenwood is living in New Brunswick, squatting on a plot of land owned by wealthy businessman R.J. Holt, harvesting sap to make maple syrup. Here he hears the cries of an abandoned infant hanging on a nail on a maple tree. After rescuing her, he travels with her across Canada, hopping trains and evading Holt's man, Harvey Lomax. In 1908, two young boys, unrelated to one another, are the sole survivors of a head-on train collision in Kingston, Ontario. The boys are taken in by town residents, however, they are never truly cared for, and they are simply given a place to live where they learn to take care of themselves. With no memory of their past, they are given the names Harris and Everett, and as they grow older, the surname Greenwood. From this tragedy, a family is built. Once we reach the Heartwood, we travel forward in time, ending back in 2038, where signs of the withering have reached Greenwood Island, and Jake has to make the difficult decision to cut down God's middle finger. This 230-foot Titan was already 150 feet tall when Shakespeare sat down and dipped his quill to begin writing Hamlet. This decision, made in an attempt to save as many trees on the island as possible, although it may be already too late, gets her fired and forcibly removed from Greenwood Island. So why do I think that Greenwood is the one book that all Canadians should read? It can be seen as a warning about climate change and environmental devastation and our need to preserve nature. There is suspense and action with a focus on greed, estrangement, sacrifice, crime, fear, and many secrets. But at its heart, it's the story of a complicated family, which is something I'm sure we can all relate to. It is simply a beautiful book. Thank you.
Next up is Hannah.
Hello, I'm Hannah, and I'm defending Station 11 by Canadian author and essayist Emily St. John Mandel. Written in 2014, the novel won the Arthur C. Clarke Award and the Toronto Book Award. It was recently made into a limited series on HBO Max. Station 11 is a captivating, mysterious, beautiful, and thought-provoking novel about survival, nostalgia, human connection, and the importance of art. Written in a non-linear fashion, the novel begins on a snowy night in Toronto at a production of Shakespeare's King Lear. Arthur Leander, a former A-list celebrity and the main actor playing King Lear, unexpectedly dies of a heart attack on stage. In the chaos following his onstage death, we learn that a deadly outbreak, the Georgia flu, has made its way across the globe, spreading like a neutron bomb over the surface of the Earth. The first few hours of this pandemic slightly resemble the beginning stages of the COVID-19 pandemic, mainly in a scene where, in the initial panic, one of the characters fills 7 shopping carts full of food, toiletries, and cleaning supplies. However, in Station 11, the Georgia flu eliminates most of the world's population, thrusting the world into an apocalypse. Things like electricity, gas, running water, and the internet quickly become useless and inexistent. Early in the novel, the author lists some of the things that are wiped out by the pandemic. No more diving into pools of chlorinated water lit green from below. No more ball games played out under floodlights. No more porch lights with moths fluttering on summer nights. No more pharmaceuticals. No more certainty of surviving a scratch on one's hand, a cut on a finger while chopping vegetables for dinner, a dog bite. The novel then jumps in time, back and forth between before and after the collapse of civilization, as we follow Arthur throughout his life and the lives of 5 characters, each with important ties to Arthur. In the 20th year following the apocalypse,
We're introduced to Kirsten, who was a child actor in the production of King Lear, where Arthur passed away. She has since had a fascination with Arthur and his life. One of her most prized possessions is a graphic novel gifted to her by Arthur called Station 11. This graphic novel depicts the life of Dr. 11, a physicist who fled his own post-apocalyptic world and lives on a space station. Dr. 11 mirrors Kirsten's feelings of nostalgia and longing for a pre-apocalyptic world. In the years since the pandemic, Kirsten has been roaming the desolate Great Lakes region of what was once Canada and the United States with a performance troupe called the Traveling Symphony. The group travels from settlement to settlement, performing music and Shakespearean theater to the communities of survivors that they encounter. The motto of this Traveling Symphony is survival is insufficient. We also meet Jeevan, a former entertainment journalist and a paramedic in training who, on the night of Arthur's death, performed CPR on the actor. We're also introduced to Miranda Carroll, Arthur's first wife, who spent her downtime writing and illustrating a graphic novel that, unbeknownst to her, would touch the lives of several people for decades to come. We meet Clark Thompson, Arthur's best friend, who ends up stranded in an airport when flights are grounded in the first days of the epidemic, and the villain of the novel, the prophet, the self-proclaimed leader of a religious cult. He's a murderous man with numerous child brides and whose connection to Arthur is one that readers will not see coming. With elements of literary fiction, mystery, and science fiction, Station 11 truly is one book to shift our perspective. The novel prompts us to consider what from our current world do we hope would survive an apocalypse? What would we take with us if the world was ending? For some characters, the great works of Shakespeare were worth conserving, while others chose to bring religion with them to the post-pandemic world. Seeing this world where there were no passports, social media, makeup, or cars, where the characters find joy and meaning in their lives despite their circumstances, really put into perspective the things that truly matter and the things that we take for granted in our lives. Mandel makes it clear that human connection, literature, and art and music are of the highest importance, though they're things that we may sometimes overlook. One character in the novel says, "People want what was best about the world." And this novel certainly shifted my perspective and made me reconsider what I think is best about the world and what brings me joy and adds beauty to my life. Station 11 is a haunting yet hopeful page turner, and I think everyone should read it. So vote Station 11 for Canada Reads 2023.
Next step is Maria.
Hello, my name is Maria and I am defending Mexican Gothic by Silvia Moreno-Garcia. She was born on the 25th of April, 1981 and raised in Mexico, and she actually moved to Canada in 2004 to complete a master's in science and technology from the University of British Columbia. Both of her parents worked for radio stations and she had always had an interest in literature. She began her career publishing in various fiction magazines and books, including Exile Quarterly. She was a finalist for the 2011 Manchester Fiction Prize. Her first short story collection, The Strange Ways of Dying, there's going to be a theme here, was published in September 2013 by Exile Editions. Her second collection, Love and Other Potions, came out in 2014 from Innsmouth Free Press. Her debut novel, Signal to Noise, was published in 2015 by Solaris Books. She serves as publisher of Innsmouth Free Press, an imprint devoted to weird fiction by her description. With Paula R. Stiles, she co-edited the historical Lovecraft, Future Lovecraft, Sword and Mythos, and She Walks in Shadows. With Orrin Gray, she co-edited Fungi, another theme, a collection of fungal fiction, which has a lot to do with this particular novel. With Lali Tidar, she edits the Jewish Mexican Literary Review. In 2016, she won a World Fantasy Award for the anthology She Walks in Shadows and a Copper Cylinder Award for her novel Signal to Noise. As of October 2019, she's also a columnist for the Washington Post. In February of 2020, she was announced as a finalist for the Nebula Award of 2019 in the Best Novel category for Gods of Jade and Shadow. Mexican Gothic, which I'm defending today, was published in 2020. The book is described as Jane Austen meets Pan's Labyrinth, the Guillermo del Toro film. So while American Gothic has been an established subset of the genre since the 19th century, in recent years, the Gothic has expanded into diversity of settings and perspectives. This book brings classic Gothic tropes and a story structured into the Mexican countryside. So we are in the 1950s with our protagonist, Noemi Taboada, in Mexico City. Her father receives a disturbing letter from her cousin Catalina, who had recently married very quickly a man called Virgil Doyle, and left Mexico City to live at her husband's grand estate in the mountains. The letter is very strange. Catalina writes of poison, ghosts, and incoherent fears about turning mad, and that her husband is trying to kill her. Noemi's father sends her to investigate and maybe bring Catalina back to Mexico City for psychological help. But when Noemi arrives at High Place, it becomes clear that there is something very wrong, not just with Catalina, but with the entire Doyle family. She arrives to a hostile and odd cast of characters. She struggles to navigate the strict rules of the house, the bigotry and racism of the Doyle patriarch, Howard Doyle, and the dangerous allure of her cousin's husband. The house itself has a power that traps its inhabitants. At first glance, the Doyles seem like any other British colonizer family, white supremacists and a legacy of wealth built on exploiting Mexican laborers in the silver mines before the Mexican Revolution. This is also set a few years before Mexico gives women the power to vote. However, it's even more sinister, and Noemi will need to uncover the family's dark secrets if she is to have any hope of getting herself and her cousin out of there alive. She finds an unlikely ally in the youngest son. Shy and gentle Francis has no desire to perpetuate the sins of his forefathers, but is he strong enough to betray his family? I believe the book can change our minds in that it's about how our environment and our ability to grow and change and to leave the mistakes of the past behind can be the difference between freedom and becoming trapped in the old ways, entrenched in bigotry and ignorance, and becoming a literal mushroom. Thank you.
Last but not least, it's Jennifer.
Thank you, Lisa. So we're saving the best for last, of course. It's Hotline by Dimitri Nasrallah. One thing I love about Canada Reads is that it presents me with the opportunity to read books that I might not have otherwise have read. It connects me with themes and issues that I might not have been interested in. It sparks reflection and presents me with books that, in the case of this year's theme, shift your perspective. Hotline by Dimitri Nasrallah is one of those books. Set in 1986 in Montreal, Hotline is the story of Muna Haddad and her son Omar. They have left behind them the civil war in Lebanon, thinking immigration to Canada will be the start of a new life for them. Trained as a French teacher in her home country, she has been told that her French skills will make the immigration application process quicker. Her application is eventually accepted, but not for the reasons that you think. Upon arrival in Montreal, Muna begins to realize just how difficult life is going to be for a single mother and her young son. They are not accepted, they are unwanted, and worse, they are invisible to everyone. Muna does her due diligence as a devoted parent and immediately starts applying at schools to work as a French teacher, believing her qualifications will be her ticket to survival. It quickly becomes apparent that her teaching background and certification mean nothing in Canada, and that no one is willing to hire her after hearing her or seeing her. As time goes on, Muna knows that she must provide for her and her young son and pay the bills and put food on the table. Thus begins a ritual of scanning newspaper ads for jobs. She eventually finds an ad for a weight loss center and begins work as a hotline agent. Although her life in Canada is filled with all sorts of barriers, Muna is quite good at listening. While at the weight loss center, people open up to her and tell her all of their problems, from bad marriages to isolation to the general emptiness of their lives. This is all very ironic, as no one will listen to her long enough to give her a job or pay her any attention. What really makes an impression in this book is Muna's determination to keep going despite being knocked down again and again. Based on the author's own mother's experiences immigrating to Montreal in the 80s, Dimitri has portrayed her story with love and tenderness. It was very difficult for him as a child to understand his mother's struggles and the challenges that she faced. This story is his nod of recognition, if you will, to a woman who did everything that she could to provide for her child and give him a better life in a society that systematically and culturally seeks to render them invisible. This book will appeal to all. It captures one woman's journey to assimilate into Canadian culture. It tries to change the narrative surrounding immigration literature from one that is dark to something equally powerful yet tender in its approach. This doesn't take away from the theme of the book or make light of Muna's plight. Rather, it forces readers to shift their perspective and see immigrants as they are, people that are part of this society. Hotlist was longlisted for the 2023 Scotiabank Giller Prize. Other books by Dimitri Nasrallah include Nico from 2011 and The Bleeds from 2018. Here's just a short excerpt from the book. At the weight loss center, I've settled into a routine. At least my first week is over now, I say to myself in the bathroom mirror on Friday night. I don't mind talking to myself. I'm only 29. I should be able to talk to someone in this country other than the customers on the phone line. I've talked both too much and not enough. I tell other people what they need or want to hear, and yet there's no one to hear me. I'm beginning to see creases around my eyes. I stretch the skin there with my fingers to see how fast it bounces back. Why not talk to myself when I'm the only person who will listen? You have lived so long in such a short period of time, I confess to my bathroom mirror. This is what the war has done to you. It has accelerated time and closed so many doors so quickly. Now, all you have to look forward to anymore, Muna, is a long hallway of closed doors.
Hey, so great. That's giving everybody a little taste of what each book is about. Now I'm going to ask each panelist the question about their book. So Maria, which classic Gothic tropes are used in Mexican Gothic?
Throughout Gothic literature, the villain of the story is often the dangerous other. In this way, Gothic literature has often been used to uphold racist, xenophobic, and imperialistic worldviews. This book challenges this trope because the other is a family of British colonizers intruding into Mexican society. They represent not just the dangers of harm to Catalina and Noemi, the characters, but a broader evil of racism and colonialism. As much as High Place is haunted by the supernatural happenings and dark family secrets, the true horror of Mexican Gothic is the ever-present specter of colonialism, racism, and eugenics. Another trope that Mexican Gothic plays with is that of the crumbling family estate. High Place is a haunted house infused with the history and characteristics of generations of Doyles. The house is rotting and decaying just like the Doyle family. Unique to Mexican Gothic is this focus on fungus as representatives of the decay. The mushroom is a particularly apt symbol since it's an organism that feeds on decay, a life that nourishes itself on death.
All right, and now Jennifer. So I don't know who's next. Jennifer, what passages strike you as insightful, even profound? Perhaps a bit of dialogue that's funny or poignant, or that encapsulates a character.
Many people say that this book has a happy ending. If that's what you believe, I would say that you've missed something very important about the book. As Hotline goes along, you see how the author has cleverly taken Muna's Middle Eastern voice and it becomes Mona's Western Montreal voice. So when she's alone with her thoughts, at night, going to bed, in the shower, she's still the old Muna from the Middle East, and she's connected to that identity. But the next morning, as her day gets going, and she gets Omar ready for school and breakfast and brush her teeth, she transitions to Mona, and so which she's created for herself because of these tough circumstances that she's in. So she's really recrafting her original dreams of being this French teacher. She's yet still developing her people skills, and she's moving on with herself in a very creative way. So some people who read the book may say, oh, well, she's succeeding. She's been successful. But is that really a happy ending? It strikes me as really sad when, in order to fit into society in Montreal, you actually have to give up your identity. So, for example, in the book, she actually decides to change her name from Muna to Mona because it sounds more pleasing to people who are living here as opposed to where she's from. So that is part of in answer to your question, that's the most impactful, profound part of the book for me.
Thank you. Danielle, can you tell us why Kate Beaton chose the word ducks in the title of her autobiographical graphic novel?
Yes, Lisa, of course. Back in 2010, oil sands giant Syncrude was found guilty on both environmental charges it was facing in connection with the April 2008 deaths of 1,600 ducks in one of its northern Alberta tailing ponds, of which Beaton refers to. Syncrude was charged under the Alberta Environmental Protection and Enhancement Act and the Federal Migratory Birds Convention Act, with failing to protect migratory birds from a toxic tailings pond. Albeit that Beaton agrees this was a tragedy when it made international headlines, she was a little disturbed that at the same time in 2008, this was one of the deadliest years for crashes on Highway 63 connecting Fort McMurray to Edmonton, which they called the Highway of Death. She saw a few of those deadly crashes, and there were a few workplace deaths when she was there, the ones that companies always downplayed how dangerous the actual sites were. And the Indigenous communities around the oil sands reported things like rare cancers. Nobody cared. For whatever reason, the ducks got people thinking, hey, now you have to do something. And Kate Beaton was like, what about the people here that are suffering? And there's also the obvious metaphor too, that these were migratory animals that got stuck in the oil, just like the workers.
Okay. So Hannah, survival is one of the main themes in Station 11. In fact, the motto of the Traveling Symphony is, as you said, survival is insufficient. How is this demonstrated by the characters in the novel?
That's a great question. So the phrase survival is insufficient really describes how each of the characters has chosen to live their lives following the societal collapse. When faced with such a situation, many people may have simply chosen to concern themselves with the basic tasks required to get to the next day. However, the characters in the novel choose not only to hunt, eat, and sleep, but they strive to improve the state of the world and the lives of others. To Kirsten and the Traveling Symphony, this means spreading joy and sharing important cultural works with other survivors by performing music and theater. Not only are they simply surviving, but they're improving the quality of life for the people they're performing for. And they're adding beauty to the world and to the lives of their audiences as well. Another survivor founded a museum of civilization where they display relics and artifacts from pre-pandemic life, things like cell phones and laptops and a pair of stiletto heels. Instead of simply surviving the pandemic, this character has created a cultural space that allows people to reflect on the past and learn about a world that once existed. This offers hope to museum goers by educating people about what once was and what maybe could once again be. This character exceeds simply surviving and finds meaning in enriching the minds of others. We also see Jeevan, the former paparazzo and the paramedic in training, who exemplifies this motto by leading a life of service and establishing what some may call a medical practice following the pandemic. So he adds meaning to his life by serving others and not just surviving day to day. So this motto, survival is insufficient, is really a reminder, not just to the characters, but to the readers as well, that no one should simply settle for existing. It's easy to become comfortable in our situation, to simply go through the motions, but we should continue to strive to better ourselves in the world every day. The novel really shows that one can lead a meaningful life and leave their mark on the world under any circumstances.
Okay, great, thank you. And Mearaid, after Harris Greenwood's death, Willow hands over her entire inheritance to a chaotic hippie collective. Do you agree with her decision?
So Willow Greenwood's adopted father, Harris Greenwood, was a lumber tycoon. And when he was alive, he told her frequently that she was written out of his will and that he was going to leave his money to somebody else. At his funeral, she finds out that that is not in fact the case, and he's going to leave his entire fortune to her alone. And her original thought is that she's going to take her young son, Liam Greenwood, and they're going to go live on Greenwood Island, and she's going to continue her hippie existence. She's going to live in the woods and grow mushrooms and plants, and she's going to have this happy life. As she's sitting at this funeral, she looks out at the audience, and it's she sees all these fat cats, and she just can't she can't go through with it. She can't do it. So she takes all of this money and gives it to this hippie commune, and she gives everything to them. I couldn't sit with that decision. I think she made the wrong decision. I think had she kept the money, she could have done so much more with it. She could have started, foundations. She could have saved the island. In the end, the island becomes the property of a conglomerate, becomes an ecotourism destination. So to answer your question, you said, no, I don't agree with the decision to give the money away. I think she could have done so much better with it.
Okay, so now the hard part. I'm gonna ask each person what the weakness of their book is, so they'll have to reveal something. So first of all, I'm gonna start with Mearaid. What is the weakness of your book?
So of course my book is perfect. It's beautiful inside and out. There were a couple of things that could have been done differently. There's a few little instances where I feel the author kind of wrote himself into a corner and conveniently did some finagling to get himself out of it. The one that stands out the most is towards the end of the novel, when Jake Greenwood is making the decision to cut down God's middle finger, which is a 230-foot high, 15-foot wide, tallest tree probably in the world at this point. She decides she's going to cut it down all by herself with a chainsaw and not get caught. So those there were a few little things like that where where the author kind of conveniently, the cabin was built with only one door, but then magically they decided they needed a second door, so they built a second door out of nothing. That kind of thing, but it absolutely does not take away from the perfection that is Greenwood.
Okay, Anna?
Yes, so though I do believe Station 11 to be nearly flawless, I would say the one weakness I found was that we don't really get to experience the apocalypse or the collapse of civilization. We hear about year zero, so the first year post-pandemic, we hear that it was so traumatic that it caused a lapse in memory for some of the characters, but no detail is given regarding the end of the world. We know that the post-apocalyptic world had no basic amenities like running water and electricity, but very little is written about how the world came to that point, especially in a world with libraries, which likely contained a wealth of information and perhaps some information about how the world worked at that time. I found it a little difficult to understand why the characters were thrust back to almost prehistoric times and why they settled for that way of life. I would have liked to learn what caused electricity and to fail, and why was it impossible for the survivors to not reestablish electricity. So we never see the characters really fighting to reestablish order in the world or get back to the way of life that they once had. So I would have appreciated a little more detail regarding what got them to that point and why was it impossible not to build back the world. However, so I would say it made it a little bit less realistic for me, but it did not take away from my rating of the novel, and it was a very minor detail.
All right, Jennifer?
So while reading this book, I thought, oh no, is it going to be one of those novels where the main character finds solutions a little too conveniently to tie up their problems? And Mearaid's laughing because she knows I get these books all the time. And I thought, oh no, is it going to be one of those that's too neat and tidy at the end? However, I'm happy to say, Mearaid, that when I finished it and I was able to take it in and I reflected back upon it, I think I realized there was a deeper message here, other than the fact that she does have a very hard time as a Canadian, a newly arrived Canadian immigrant and a single mother. You're so used to thinking that in order to hit its mark and be considered great, a book about immigration has to be complex and dark and suffering and very painful, so much so that a book like Hotline may be overlooked because it's considered too simple or too straightforward. As one reviewer said, fiction about immigrants tends towards the melancholy and tragedy. However, Dimitri's new novel delivers something different. So I would strongly argue that's the kind of novel that demonstrates that even in hard times, there are still kind people that exist in the world who are willing to help you with no ulterior motives. And I think that's sort of her lesson in the book, is learning to ask for help, and you don't have to endure hardships by yourself. So I guess in answer to your question, it's not really a weakness. So I guess it is perfect.
Okay. All right, Danielle.
I'm of two minds about the weakness that I'm going to talk about, because there were some people out there online who did say, be careful if you've had any experiences of sexual assault, you will not like this book. So on the one hand, do we stay away from this book? But on the other hand, we need to discuss these events. We need to talk about them. We need to move past them. And the way that they're described is not in your face. It's delicate. It's important. It needs to be said. So is it a weakness? It is and it isn't. And I would like to remind everyone who watched the Oscars not too long ago that Sarah Polley did say, when she received her award for Best Adapted Screenplay, thank you to the Academy for not being mortally offended that I used the words women and talking so closely together, the book by Marion Tapes. Thank you.
Okay, and lastly, Maria.
I love criticizing things. I think the main thing I would critique is the pacing, because the book delves into madness. It takes a while for the plot to really get going. And once it gets going, it's quite compelling, but that is a critique that is very common for this one. My other critique, I don't know if this is a flaw of the book, I am easily grossed out. And I may never eat a mushroom again after reading it. And that may lead others to also feel that that is a flaw. My book also not so delicately touches upon sexual assault, but perhaps because it's a horror novel, that is more acceptable in this context, because I saw no complaints about it. That's it.
Panelists, here's your last chance to convince the audience. Based on what you've heard from your fellow panelists, which book do you feel should be eliminated from being the one book to shift our perspective, and why? So Hannah, this is your chance to pitch.
This was an incredibly difficult decision. I think all the books are wonderful in their own ways, but as there can only be one winner, I'm going to have to eliminate Mexican Gothic. For starters, I'm simply not a fan of the Gothic horror genre, but also I was quite disappointed with the big twist in the story, the big secret that lies in high place. I'm not going to give away what that is, but for a novel that promised to be terrifying, I found that what was supposed to be the big scary monster was very underwhelming. So for that reason, I eliminate Mexican Gothic.
I'm sorry. All right, Maria, your chance to answer.
In return, I will eliminate Station 11. But hear me out. So I actually loved the book, but I read it before the pandemic. And with the theme of changing your mind, what I found during the pandemic, and this is a little pessimistic, I found that rather than changing people's minds, people just doubled down on whatever they believed pre-pandemic as deeply as they possibly could. And on the grounds of that, not on the basis of don't read the book is excellent. But that is why, and not because Hannah attacked me first.
Jennifer.
So I came in here with a clear decision of who I was going to vote off. And then, I think I've changed my mind. So I was coming in voting off Station 11 because it has already had its chance to be on the shortlist for Canada Reads back in 2016. So I feel like it's had its chance. And there was a lot of other stuff out there on the long list that could be, considered. However, no, it's okay, Mearaid. You've been saved a little bit because my vote actually is not going to stay with Station 11. It's going to go to Ducks because I'm so sorry, Danielle. And I was really happy because we've been doing this for a long time, a lot of us on this panel, and it was really happy to see another type of genre, like a graphic novel, make it into Canada Reads. They've been on the long list before, but none of these, other than, fiction, nonfiction, some biographies that made it through, stuff like this never makes it to the end. And I was so excited. And I have to say, oh boy, it was really hard to get through. Yeah, I found it a bit of an exhausting read. So for that reason alone, I'm voting off Ducks.
All right. And Mearaid.
So I don't like voting off books because I love all books. My original thought had also been Ducks, but I'm just gonna go with something arbitrary and I'm gonna vote off Mexican Gothic because it's not Mexican, that's not what I was, because it's horror, but just because I don't like mushrooms. I'm gonna go with that.
So the mushrooms didn't shift my perspective.
Okay. Perspective.
All right, Danielle, you get the last word in this part.
Thankfully, I get to save my ducks here. Please read Ducks. No, I'm not going to be mean. Initially, I was intending to vote your book off, Jen, but because I was just thinking Montreal, the 80s, I'm over it, another immigrant story. Sorry, but I'm going to attack Hannah's book. Sorry, Hannah, but we're all fed up of hearing about the pandemic. I don't want to hear about it anymore, and this is why I'm voting off your book.
Okay, all right. So what we're gonna do, we're gonna have everybody, we're gonna pass out some pencils and you can vote on the speaker, the person who you think's book fits this year's theme of one book to shift our perspectives. So Hotline is Jennifer, Station 11 is Hannah, Mearaid is Greenwood, Maria is Mexican Gothic, and Danielle is Ducks. And while we're doing that, so we'll pass out some pencils, you get a chance to fill it out, and while we're doing that, you have a chance if you'd like to ask any of the panelists a question about the books. So that's what we're gonna do. If somebody wants to, maybe Angie, yeah, pencils. All right, so we have a question, yeah. So just whoever you think, whichever book you think, or the defender, or for whatever reason, you don't like mushrooms, which book do you think best answers the theme, one book to shift your perspective, okay? Yeah. There's a question for you.
The book about sorry about this. I think the book about the pandemic. Okay, so you mentioned that you found a huge challenge that change. Now, is it people of your age? Or is it people of my age?
Actually, it's the characters span in age. So there are people in their 20s, but we also see someone in their 60s and 70s, and how they.
I thought you were talking about anecdotally about the people that are around.
No.
I was attacking the book.
Oh, okay, so when you're attacked, you're the one who mentioned, sorry.
Yeah,
You're the one who mentioned that people did change.
people struggle.
Okay. Okay, now, are those people anecdotally from your or from older people or in general?
I think in general, I
Because
think
find that older people, we change the law.
that's fair.
And we ponder about whatever time is left, what will we do differently? And what do we consider to be very important?
That is a defense of station 11, I think.
Yeah.
I think it's,
In the word, you buy the I want to talk and follow. On this. They really brought the book to life, we made excellent. And I said, I don't see them all.
Okay, Andrew's gonna go around and collect the sheets, and while we're doing that, yes, we have another question to ask.
Danielle is a graphic novel. Does that fall category of like the comic book?
So the lady is asking if the graphic novel falls into the same category as a comic book.
It's a graphic novel, but it is autobiographical. So it's sort of like a memoir and a graphic novel at one.
I heard people say that the children to read comics is actually a good thing. For children to read comics is actually a good thing. And then there are others who say, well, comics are a waste of time. So what is your opinion?
I think it's a great way to introduce younger readers, reluctant readers, to read something that they can connect to. And this is my point when I was saying that a graphic novel is more inclusive, more accessible. Not everyone thinks the same. Creative types, sometimes get more out of seeing a picture illustrated this way. So the method of storytelling is different. And it's the only one here that showcases it that way. So I do think it's changing one's perspective.
All right, so we are going to, okay, well. Okay, we've got some online viewers who may be tallying votes. Okay, we have another vote over here. Somebody, hard decision, okay. So I would just like to mention while we're doing that, in case you're interested, the real CBC Canada Reads will be taking place March 27th through the 30th. Live at 10:05 a.m. Eastern time. And they're on various platforms, streaming online, cbcbooks.ca. Later, I think it'll be on YouTube and Facebook, on CBC radio, television, and I think they replay the television one at 1 o'clock in the afternoon or 1:05, something like that. Yeah, CBC TV. 1 p.m. on TV, and they will podcast each episode after the live airing, so you can download it. Okay, so while we're tallying up do we have all your votes? Okay, all right. Can I take yours? I've got yours. Okay. All right, so while they're counting up the votes, we are going to do a draw. Danielle, would you come over and help do the draw, or I'll get the people? Okay. So CBC very generously gives us a copy of each of the books and a bag, and we are going to draw for those. Right. And we'll just do it in order. Mexican Gothic. So, ending in the number 455. 575 455. Yay! Now I found Mexican Gothic, like, I don't like horror either, but it was quite readable. It went and you kind of get over she said the denouement, and then it's not so scary. I didn't find it. Okay, all right, let's do this first. Okay, next. For station 11, 413, ending in 413. Okay. Here, Jennifer. So the next one is Greenwood, which is an interesting. So 454. 454, yeah. Next, the much debated ducks, which looks like a big book, but you know, with pictures, it's not as long. It's not a bad. 495. Yeah, all right. So Hotline, I like reading books about Montreal. So going, yes, I know that place. Oh yeah. I mean, there was still an Eaton's and a Simpsons and a. Okay, 414. Yes, all right. And what everybody needs is another bag, of course. Not paper, so we're not cutting down a tree for this. Okay. 424. All right, yay, thank you. All right, very good. All right, so it was a close race. So our winner, wait a minute. It wasn't a close race. All right. So the winner this year with the one book, the person who best has spent, promoted one book to shift our perspective is Hotline, Jennifer. And she led the pack by quite a lot. So I won't leave the other ones, they're about the same as one of you, I won't even say tell you. But they're all really interesting books, and
Yeah, I was just gonna add, that's the one thing that's great about Canada Reads. In my little intro, I did say it. It really does spark interest. It connects you with books that you may not have otherwise picked up, and all the books on the panel, and this usually happens every year, I would say, they're all very different. And yes, sometimes it means people vote more for one book, but it really does give us an opportunity to explore different genres and different types of storylines, because some of it, even being librarians here, we'd be like, oh, I'm not interested in that, but this forces us to do.
yeah, no, they were all readable. I would say, I think the perspective of Station 11, had I read it when it first came out, would have been very different from reading it now after what we've all been through. And it's like, ooh, that's sometimes it was like a little too close to the bone. Anyway, I had to put it down occasionally, just like, not that it was horrific, it was just like, I don't really want to look at that right now, but it's worth going through anyways, because I guess now that we have gone through the pandemic, we kind of have to face these questions and sort of say like, is this the kind of world we want? And if something bad happens again, what are we gonna do? Because I don't know, we didn't do. Yes, one more question. Yeah, we're doing the same CBC books that were selected and are going to be defended by people like Matea Roach, who was on Jeopardy, and various other Canadian celebrities. So you'll have to see what they came up with. Obviously, they have much more time to defend the books than we have here. Yeah, it's over 5 days. So the 27th through the 30th of March. So you'll see how we did.
Yeah, the family is from the Middle East. He was born there. They were born they were all born in Lebanon. And when they came to Montreal, Montreal wasn't their first landing spot. I think they went through Greece as well as another area before coming to North America. And actually, he says in some of the interviews that of all the places they traveled through before coming to Montreal and settling here, North America, Montreal was the most difficult place to actually settle and feel wanted and connected to the community. All the other places they had come through, one of them being Greece, it was a lot more seamless, maybe because it's Europe, yeah, it's not North America, maybe the culture is closer, the dynamic, the community connections. We don't necessarily have that in North America. So, but the whole family was born there and they came together. I didn't want to give away too much of the story, what happens to the husband. But she does end up immigrating, just her and her son.
Thank you very much for being welcome.
Apart from the fact that I think that this book will win the CBC because Medea Roach is defending it, and how many times did she win on Jeopardy? Excuse me. Apart from that, I would like to let you all know that we have a literary event here on Tuesday, March 28th. It was supposed to be next Wednesday evening with Balarama Wholeness. You might think, what's that name again? Because he ran for politics. He will be here interviewed by Idol Issa on Tuesday, March 28th at 7 p.m. His book is Eyes on the Horizon, how he came over racism living here. As you know, he has a father from Jamaica and his mother is from Quebec. So it should be a very interesting talk. Tuesday, March 28th, right here at 7 p.m. If you'd rather be home, no problem, you can tune in.
Great. Well, thank you very much for being brave enough to join us this afternoon. We're thrilled to see you. We really enjoyed having you. Thank you so much.